that was a kind of beautiful diversion from the Doge discussion. if we're going to return briefly to Doge.
Sure.
So you kind of talked about cost cutting, but there's also increasing the efficiency of government,
Yep.
which you also kind of talked about with procurement.
Yeah.
So and maybe we can throw into the pile the 400 plus federal agencies.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take another perspective on what success might look like. So like radically successful Doge, would it basically cut a lot of federal agencies?
Probably combine.
Combine.
Okay, so I can give great examples of this because I have a great insight. Like for each agency will often use different like payroll systems. They'll have different internal processes, right? That makes no sense. And it's all because it's antiquated. Now, everybody always talks about changing it, but there are a lot of like party interests about why certain people get certain things. The real problem with government, the people like us who are private, and like, for example, when you want to do something, you can just do it. So I was listening to a really interesting analysis about law enforcement and the military. So I think the story was that the military was assigned, some National Guard guys were assigned to like help with the border. And they were trying to provide, I think it was translation services to people at Border Patrol. But somebody had to come down and be like, hey, this has got to stop. According to US Code X, Y, and Z, the United States military cannot help with law enforcement, abilities here. And so even though that makes absolutely no sense because they're all work, there are literal legal statutes in place that prevent you from doing the most efficient thing possible. So for some reason, we have to have a ton of Spanish speakers in Southcom, in the U.S. command that is responsible for South America, who literally cannot help with a crisis at the border. Now, maybe you can find some legal chicanery to make that work, but man, you got to have an attorney general who knows what he's doing. You need a White House counsel. You need to make sure that shit stands up in a court of law. I mean, it's not so simple. Whereas, let's say, you have a software right here and you want to get a new software, you can just do it. You can hire whoever you want. When you're the government, there's a whole process you got to go through about bidding, and it just takes forever, and it is so inefficient. But unfortunately, the inefficiency is really derivative of a lot of legal statutes. And that is something that, again, actually, radically successful Doge, quote unquote, would be study the law and then change it. Like instead of cost cutting, like cut this program or whatever, like I just said about why do different systems use payroll, just say that you can change the statute under which new software can be updated, let's say after 90 days. I've heard stories of people who work for the government who still have like IBM mainframe that they're still in 2024 that they're still working because those systems have never been updated. There's also a big problem with a lot of this clearance stuff. That's where a lot of inefficiency happens because a lot of contractors can only work based upon previous clearance that they already got. Achieving a clearance is very expensive. It's a very lengthy process. I'm not saying it shouldn't be talking about security clearance, but it does naturally, create a very small pool that you can draw some contracts from. And I even mean stuff like the janitor at the Pentagon needs a security service, right? So clearance. So there's only like 5 people who or can even apply for that contract. Well, naturally, in an internal monopoly like that, he's going to jack his price up because he literally has a moat around his product. Whereas if you or I are hiring a anybody for anything, that type of credentialism and legal regime, it doesn't matter at all. So there are a million problems like this that people in government run into. And that is what I would see as the most successful.
Paperwork slows everything down, and it feels impossible to break through that in a sort of incremental way.
It's so hard.
It feels like the only way to do it is to literally shut down agencies in some kind of radical way and then build up from scratch. Of course, as you highlight, that's going to be opposed by a lot of people within government.
Yeah. Well, historically, there's only one way to do it, and it's a really bad answer. War.
Yeah. So I was going to say, basically, you have the kind of consensus where, okay, all this stupid bureaucratic bullshit we've been doing, we need to put that shit aside, get the fuck out of here. We need to win a war. So all the paperwork, all the lawyers go leave.
yeah, exactly. No, but I want people to really understand that, up until 1865 or 1860, I forget the exact year, we didn't even have national currency. And then we were like, well, We need a greenback. And prior to that, people would freak out if we were talking about having national currency, greenback, backed by the, the U.S. government and all of that. Not even a question. Passed in like 2 weeks in the U.S. Congress. An income tax eventually went away, but not even in the realm of possibility. And they decided to pass it. Same thing after World War I. And you think about how World War II, World War II just fundamentally changed the entire way the United States government works. Even the DHS, which I mentioned earlier, the Department of Homeland Security, it didn't even exist prior to 9/11. It was done as response to 9/11 to coalesce all of those agencies under one branch to make sure that nothing like that could ever happen again. And so historically, unfortunately, absolute shit show disaster war is the only thing that moves and throws the paperwork off the table. And I wish I wasn't such a downer, but I've read too much and I've had enough experience now in Washington to just see how these dreams get crushed instantly. And I wish it wasn't that way. It's a cool idea, and I want people who are inspired, who are getting into politics, to think that they can do something, but I want them to be realistic too. And I want them to know what they're signing up for whenever they do something like that, and the titanic amount of work it is going to take for you to be able to accomplish something.
Yeah, but I've also heard a lot of people in Silicon Valley laughing when Elon rolled in and fired 90% of Twitter. Here's this guy, Elon Musk, that
You are absolutely correct.
knows nothing about running a social media company.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you need all these servers. Of course you need all these employees.
Right.
And nevertheless, the service keeps running.
He figured it out, and you have to give him eternal credit for that. I guess the difference is there was no law that he could fire him. There was no like at the end of the day, he owned the company. He had total discretion of his ability to move. So I'm not even saying his ideas are bad. I'm saying that the ability that what makes him such an incredible visionary entrepreneur. It's movement. It's deference at times to the right people, but also the knowledge of every individual piece of the machine and his ability to come in and to execute his full vision at any time and override any of the managers. So I talked previously about the professional managerial class and the managerial revolution. Elon is one of the few people who's ever built a multi-billion-dollar company who has not actually fallen victim to the managerial revolution and against entrepreneurship and innovation that happens there. There are very few people who can do it. Elon, Steve Jobs, but what do we learn is that unfortunately after Steve died, Apple basically did succumb to the managerial revolution and has become like the product. They make all their money by printing services and making it impossible to leave this ecosystem, as opposed to building the most cool product ever. As much as I love my Vision Pro, don't get me wrong.
I think you just admitted that you're part of a cult.
I know, I literally am. Yeah. I am. I fully admit it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I miss Steve.
The grass is green on the other side. Come join us.